Hello there. We are talking, as you see, about the Rolling Stone, Useful Idiots. And this is about Shahid Buttar. He's a challenger to Nancy Pelosi. And of course, he has to deal with allegations. They've talked with him before, as you can see down here, and they're all smiles. But this time, they're not all smiles. The young lady looks disgusted, as a matter of fact. As you can see, she doesn't look very happy, either one, because now this is what's going on here. These people don't mind #MeToo and false allegations when it's just the average guy on the street getting zapped. But every once in a while, some guy who they want to accomplish something, he gets zapped. And now it's a problem. It's only recently, in the last few months, that I see that's a problem for these people because they don't realize, or they don't want to realize, that all men are fair game. Not just their special little boys get to be exempt from it, okay?
Of a Me Too accusation about sexual impropriety, and we'll get into the factual basis of that. But then in addition to that, there's a couple of other things going on that ultimately come down to a question of whether or not certain behaviors in the workplace constitute abuse.
Right.
And I think, Katie, you and I may differ on this a little.
Yeah, I suspect she does. Because this abuse is usually, if not always, pointed to a man. So he's probably realizing that there's a lot of behaviors that are harmless or innocuous, and she wants to be able to say, no, this is very important.
A little bit, but it's a really interesting story about what constitutes impropriety, what constitutes a news story, what things we should be talking about, and what things are just things that go on in the workplace.
Right.
And we're gonna get into all that with him.
Just so people know, I did reach out to some of the people who allege workplace toxicity, and no one wanted to go on the record.
There are obviously.
That's right. No one wanted to go on the record. If this guy was actually doing something wrong and they could prove it, they would just go on the record and zap him. And this proves everything we've been saying about #MeToo and this type. The point isn't to actually is to reveal whether the person's actually done anything, because they haven't done anything. It's just to make the accusation and punish the person. That's it. That's all it's about.
Right now, there's a story that's about your campaign, but also a story about your campaign in a different way. Do you want to set it up for viewers and listeners, just what the status is right now in terms of allegations that have roiled the campaign, as The Intercept said, I believe, in its headline?
Sure. There were a pair of accusations that emerged when my former staff brought to the press the accusations of someone in D.C. who claimed that I harassed her many years ago.
There you go, many years ago. Why do you think these women never come out when it happens? Why? Because they weren't able to #MeToo in the past. This woman could have gone to some kind of authority in the past, but it's only now that there's no consequences and that they could just destroy this man with no effort. That's when it happens.
And then my staff had claimed that on our campaign team that they had experienced gendered treatment. And the result of those claims were a series of news articles by local press.
You see, this is how the bandwagon effect happens. Once one person joins up, that's when the sharks come in. That's when they start circling.
And then international press, a number of local political organizations raced to rescind their endorsements of our campaign. And I'm very eager for the facts finally to start coming to light.
Before we get into that too much, do you have any indication that there's the Pelosi campaign played any role in anything here, or is this an organically developing story?
I wouldn't say that they had a direct hand. Certainly, they're a beneficiary of the accusations, and I would say that maybe it's an indirect effect insofar as the folks who I hired to work on my campaign came from the city's progressive establishment, and the progressive establishment in San Francisco generally remains beholden to Pelosi.
Now they're trying to make this a political thing. It's not political. What's happened here is a young woman decided to flex her dominance muscles on this guy. On an individual scale, there are psychopaths and sociopaths out there. This young woman showed up, and as an individual, she could be a lowlife, and all of a sudden, people don't ever look at that. You see, in order to deal with it, with what's happening to men, this campaign, they're trying to say, oh, maybe she was a bug, or not a bug, what do you call it, an infiltrator for Pelosi, right? In the comment sections, I've seen the odd person actually suggest that. Because they want to avoid the gender dynamics. They want to avoid the simple fact that women don't respect men, don't particularly like men. And there's individuals that they would hurt a man if they could get away with it. And now women can get away with it. So the sociopaths, or they don't have to be a sociopath, they just have to be just a lowlife. And then they go out for attack this guy. So these people, they want the Saeed Buttar to succeed, but they want him to also be able to be destroyed at any time by some woman who's a nobody and has done nothing for society at all.
They had a direct hand. Certainly, they're a beneficiary of the accusations, and I would say that maybe it's an indirect effect insofar as the folks who I hired to work on my campaign came from the city's progressive establishment, and the progressive establishment in San Francisco generally remains beholden to Pelosi. She's the head of the party, and so even if people here locally favor Medicare for all or climate justice or defunding the police, the progressive establishment in San Francisco hasn't seen fit to stand by those commitments in our race. And so I do think that the tacit pressure on people seeking political careers to ally themselves with that establishment may have played a role here. That is very different, however, than Pelosi and the Democratic establishment engineering this. I think, if anything, it was, to use your word, organic, driven by people who had their own interests.
There you go. He doesn't believe it either. So you can't blame, some kind of conspiracy from the opposition. It's organic. He's saying it, but he can't go all the way, right? He can't say how it's organic. Why do these people come after him? Because look how it happens. It's just some young girl looking at a guy and not liking him and saying, yeah, I can do him harm, so I'm going to do it. There's no consequences. That's what's happening. Now, this young lady, so disgusted looking, by the way. Now, her look of disgust might be, like I say, maybe they wanted this guy to succeed, and now he's not. But it also could be a simple case that she is like a football fan whose team scored a touchdown, on this guy, and then she's being forced to look at the replay and realized it was out of bounds. That's what it looks like to me. I could be wrong. Now, I'll get to see what this guy is actually about.
I think it's that the case you're referring to, I believe, is one where people, to be charitable, it could have been misunderstood. It was someone who wanted her number given out to someone to be introduced to volunteer with that person. And the way it was presented was as if you were inappropriately demanding her number from someone for other reasons. So in these text messages, you see a back and forth. And as you said, this volunteer kind of repeatedly denies that that's what was happening. It could have been a misunderstanding, right? With a very persistent,
I don't think so. Well, I'll sketch out the scenario that preceded it. And I know this to be true now because the volunteer who is the subject of these rumors came forward to our campaign to say, I've been feeling disgusted since these stories ran. And she had some very insightful, or let's just say colorful terms about my former staff. So we're at an event. One of my donors and volunteers who's very active in putting up signs around the city, he was very active in doing banner drops for Bernie. And he'd come up with some clever ways to use magnets to hang banners in public spaces. And another donor and volunteer who was there in the same space, a young woman, was interested in joining him to do a banner drop. So I say to my former finance director, can you make sure that she gets connected to him? And I ended up having to ask her several times because she refused to have the conversation. And then the gossip that she started peddling was that I was trying to hook up sexually one volunteer with another so that I could look like the man, I suppose, was the rumor.
There you go. That's it. He's not even coming onto this woman. It's not even him directly. It's just she's a newbie. She's a new volunteer. She hasn't done anything for this organization at all. And he's looking and saying, okay, well, I will hook you up with this more experienced volunteer who happens to be a man. Well, it doesn't happen to be a man. It doesn't surprise me that their best volunteers are men. Honestly, come on. Men are well motivated. And they're problem solvers. And they come up with this shit. And of course, he wants to, so out of the goodness of his heart, he could have just let her, sit around. But he said, oh, this woman says she wants to help us out. Okay, let's connect her to someone who's experienced. And of course, she used that to come after this guy. This is it in a nutshell. And this is what ticks me off about RollingStone and these types of people, is that they're now upset that someone who they want something done can't do it because everything they've been backing, these guys backed hashtags MeToo. They backed them. But now one of their guys are getting zapped. Now it's a problem. Know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of like a white nationalist group. They're getting a dam built. And and one of the nationalists says, gas the kikes. And then they say, hold it now, man. Our best engineer is Bergstein. Wait till Bergstein is done building the dam. Then you can gas the kikes. That's what this reminds me of. This is what hashtag MeToo is about. It's the gender KKK. That's what's going on here. And you know something? This Sahi guy, if he had failed, or let's say his career was done in the future, and he'd just become a former go-getter, and this woman would come after him, they would not have him here on RollingStone. They would not. They would not be giving him a free shake. They'd just say, yep, we thought that man was good, but it turns out he's a piece of garbage. And that's what they would be probably writing, I suspect. But because he's still useful to them, and they still want him to succeed, now it's an issue. That's what's happening here.
Or is it because the audiences are more receptive to those kinds of stories on the left? I mean, I'm just curious why it seems to only be happening with like the most progressive kinds of candidates.
Right. I think that if we compare the tendency of the press versus the interest of the audience, I think of that as almost like a chicken and egg problem. I think the interest of the audience probably drives the interests of the press. And if we just were to contrast the interest on the left versus the interest on the right, our asshole criminal president has done vastly worse things, right? And they're fairly apparent, if only because there's a pattern.
This guy comes off as completely begging. Completely, please listen to me. Please, I'm the good guy. I wouldn't be begging. I'd be coming on and said, this bitch falsely accused me and she belongs in jail. That's what I'd be saying.
Pattern of accusation that stretches across multiple people and years, and hasn't paid a political price or any price for it. And I think
His followers don't care.
Well, that's my point. Is that on the right, the audience doesn't in fact care, and the audience that cares is on the left. And the idea that I think there's also an element here of the role that identity politics has come to play in the left as an alternative to a understand.
Yeah, this is identity politics, all right. You're a man, and the person who accused you is a woman. It's sexual identity, and that's it. All you minority men don't matter about your minorities. It's all a shield. It's all thrown in. It's like, where's Waldo? They throw everything in, and people start avoiding the simple fact that it's a woman who accused you a man, and that's the way it's always been.
Understanding of how power dynamics and resources have been distributed and how that narrative has unfolded over time. I think the role of identity politics has been very unfortunate here, both in distracting people as individuals and entire communities from what is at stake, and also by creating, priming the pump for this kind of accusation pattern. And at the end of the day, I think that as much as our various interests driven by our identities and our historical marginalizations can bring us together, they also can divide us. And I think that it's important for us to stand together as people and to be committed, as I am, an intersectional feminist, to eradicating marginalization wherever it emerges.
There you
and
go.
I saw it demonstrating in the attack on me, people claiming to be some kind of.
This guy just admitted he's an intersectional feminist. Feminism is a hate movement against men. So this guy gets everything he deserves. I have no sympathy for this guy. This man is claiming feminism is eradicating it. This is bullshit. See, this is what it is. All this identity politics is only one identity politics. Female to male. It's a sexual one. And so he's like so many of the other guys, like this is where the left wingers are no different from the right wingers. The right wingers do this obscuring as well, like calling the left in. Like this comes from feminism. And then he wants to say, no, there's these other progressive groups that does it, right? It's not his camp. It's not like he's a Jew being able to thrown in the oven by the Nazis. He said, no, the Nazis love me, so it's got to be the Russians, it's that sort of thing. I have no sympathy for these guys, none. It feels good to see these discussing, because something, he'd be the type of guy who would probably destroy another man like this. Or let's say, if he saw another man getting hashtag, he'd say, yeah, that man, he deserves it. No, we don't need a trial. We don't need to anyone. Just listen and believe. If he's an intersectional feminist, he's into listen and believe. That's what's going on here. And so he doesn't deserve any better. That's why he's so begging. That's why he's coming on and saying, look, please, I've been a good little soldier boy who's willing to throw every other man under the bus. So please reconsider that when destroying me. Give me another chance. Screw this guy. Not just him, all these guys who who become feminist, feminist allies. These guys don't deserve any consideration as far as I'm concerned. If I was going to stop this from happening to him, it'd be done out of principle. I'd say, no, it's not right. I'm a man. I deserve respect as a human being. But definitely not because this guy doesn't deserve, his own poison. And that's what I have to say about this.